General Hospital spoilers reveal that Jason is entering an unprecedented phase of his life, where the pressures he faces no longer come from street shootouts or dangerous missions in the criminal underworld, but from deep, internal turmoil. The personal relationships he once suppressed, concealed, and sacrificed for are now rising up powerfully all at once. For years, Jason has learned to prioritize responsibility over emotion, to reject love if it puts those he cares about in danger, and to walk alone so no one would have to suffer the consequences of the path he chose. But now, a series of overwhelming events, exposed secrets, broken relationships, and especially the unexpected arrival of new women in his life, have forced Jason to stop and look deeply within himself. He must now confront the question he has always avoided: does he still believe in love? At this moment, one of the new pressures is exploding, not an impossible mission, not an enemy ready to strike, but the silent yet intense invasion of emotions. The women who enter his life now do not appear as fragile muses needing protection. They are strong, experienced, complex women, just like him. They do not ask Jason to change, do not demand he live differently, do not try to touch parts of him he is not ready to share. They simply appear, stay by his side, and gradually make him realize that love doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't need to be declared, it only needs to exist at the right time, with the right person. This, though seemingly small, is opening up a powerful emotional adjustment greater than any physical shock Jason has ever experienced. Meanwhile, Jason still faces the remnants of his old life, the unresolved relationships with Carly, the unclosed ties with Sam, his obligations to the Quartermaine family, and especially the legacy of Sonny that still clings to every step he takes. Everyone has their own expectations, everyone wants Jason to remain the center of their stories. But this time, Jason is learning to place himself at the center of his own life. He no longer wants to be the invisible protector, the silent sacrificer, or the man who always does what's right despite the pain. He wants to choose, to be loved for who he truly is, not for the image others think he should be. And from this desire, Jason begins to see the changes forming within himself. Things he once considered weaknesses are now becoming strengths. He allows himself to smile more, to open up more, to see gentleness as part of his nature rather than something to hide. His belief in love is being reaffirmed, not by the return of old faces, but by new women who are patient enough to look beyond his thick walls of defense and stay, even when they are not invited. And as this belief takes root, Jason understands that what he once thought was impossible is now the very thing that makes him feel truly alive in a world full of chaos. The appearance of new women in his life is not just a refreshing element in Jason's story, but also a symbol of an entirely new chapter in his life, one where he is loved not for what he does for others, but for his whole being, vulnerable, yet incredibly resilient. These women, each in their own way, are helping Jason rebuild the concept of love that he had once tried to give up, a love that does not require sacrificing everything, but teaches him how to keep part of himself while still sharing his life with others. And from this, Jason begins to believe that he can love without giving up everything, that he can enter a relationship without choosing between his heart and loyalty, and that love, if it's with the right person, won't make him lose anyone, but will help him find himself. Thus, pressure no longer feels like a burden, but is turning into motivation, a source of internal energy that pushes Jason to step out of his old comfort zone, where there was only fighting, loyalty, and silence. He is discovering a new form of strength, not from guns or loyalty to an organization, but from the ability to acknowledge that he, too, deserves to be loved, chosen, and to live according to emotions that were once locked away in the dark. This is what is propelling Jason into a completely new phase of his life, where every choice, every emotion, and every new person he meets can be the start of a chapter that redefines who he is. And that is what makes everything feel wild, vibrant, and more important than ever. Jason is slowly becoming the center of a series of complex, heavy emotional shifts in Port Charles, as deepening interactions with a group of women begin to create an undercurrent stronger than ever before. No longer the man living in the shadows with his black leather jacket and unwavering principles. Jason is now facing a fundamental change, a continuous internal adjustment under the pressure of emotions he can no longer avoid. In this context, the growing relationships between Jason and Sasha and Anna become powerful catalysts, bringing him closer to his true nature, a man full of emotions, bearing many wounds, but no longer willing to deny his desire to be loved and understood. With Sasha, Jason entered her life as a quiet refuge, where she found peace and safety after the darkest years of her life. Having lost her child, her husband, and herself during a mental health crisis, Sasha once believed she would never again experience love or trust. But Jason, with his quiet presence, observation, listening, and silent actions, is the one person who has made her begin to open up again. Without needing any words of comfort or dramatic gestures, Jason is there like a loyal sentinel, protecting not just her body but also her soul in moments when she is most fragile. And slowly, from shared glances, from standing next to each other in silence, a nameless feeling begins to form between them, not necessarily love, but a solid foundation for something much deeper. With Anna, the relationship with Jason is woven together by history, admiration, and emotional scars that only they can understand. Two people from seemingly opposite worlds, one representing justice, the other living outside the law, yet united in their loneliness, the weight of responsibility, and the losses that have eaten away at their hearts for years. Anna sees in Jason something that no one else can, a brutal integrity with himself. And Jason recognizes in Anna a quiet strength, a quality that allows him to trust her not with words, but with actions and faith. They don't need a clear definition of their relationship, because the connection between them lies in their mutual understanding to the very core. When Anna smiles at Jason backstage at a closed meeting, when Jason unconsciously steps up to stand by her at a community event, neither of them realizes how much closer their hearts have come. The 2025 Nurses' Ball, traditionally a stage for light, laughter, and emotional performances, now becomes the perfect backdrop for a major emotional adjustment that is exploding. No longer are the dances or music performances just for show. This year's event sees the gathering of a series of women around Jason: Sasha, Anna, Carly, Elizabeth, and Maxie, each carrying a history with him, an incomplete piece, a story unfinished, either waiting to close or continue. Jason doesn't step on stage, but all eyes are on him, not because of his physical presence, but because of the emotional layers surrounding him like a mysterious aura. Every woman passing through Jason's life is there, feeling the quiet energy radiating from this silent man. And each of them, in their own way, is being pulled toward him, like an irresistible force. Amid the stage lights, the brilliant performances, and the fake joy of the crowd, Jason becomes the focal point of a change that even he can't yet define. His interactions with the women are not just a return of the past, but the beginning of a new emotional current, where belief in love is redefined by patience, silent companionship, and the healing power not expressed in words. Sasha is like the faint light at the end of the tunnel Jason once thought would never appear. Anna is like the mirror reflecting his strength and inner wounds. Carly is like the old wind reminding him of things he has missed, and Elizabeth and Maxie are like memories that have never fully closed. One of the new connections between Jason and the women around him is no longer about isolated relationships but is forming a cohesive emotional structure, where each one represents a slice of his journey toward inner healing. And the 2025 Nurses' Ball, with all its lights and colors, becomes the place where the darkness in Jason's soul begins to fade, as he finally allows others to get closer to him, not out of duty, not for protection, but because he himself wants it. This adjustment doesn't come with an explosion, doesn't come with a bold decision, but with very human, very private moments, a longer than usual glance, an unconscious touch of hands, silent companionship among the crowd. And that is why everything is slowly but surely exploding. No one can be sure who Jason will choose, or if he will choose anyone at all. But one thing is certain. He is letting himself be felt, something he never allowed before. And this is the beginning of everything great. In the world of those with heavy pasts like Jason, simply daring to believe in love is a revolution. And this time, he will not back down. The story of Jason potentially rekindling his relationship with Carly is becoming the focal point of a simmering but intense public debate in Port Charles. As the emotional signs between the two people who once shared a deep history begin to resurface in a surprising and dangerous way. Jason and Carly, once the embodiment of unconditional loyalty. Two souls so connected that words weren't necessary, are once again drawn into each other's orbit, set against the backdrop of a world in chaos, family issues, honor, and new relationships that have yet to settle. What seemed to be closed is now slowly opening, not through a dramatic declaration, but through suggestive moments, familiar glances, and actions only two people who truly understand each other can share. The prospect of Jason and Carly getting back together is not merely about rekindling a romance but represents an event that would completely reshape the power dynamics in Port Charles. If it happens, they would become a new power couple, not in the polished social sense, but in the literal sense, two people who have lost everything, who have stood between life and death, who have shared love, hate, and loyalty, now coming back together to control the game once more. And this is becoming one of the greatest obsessions. Not only for those closest to them but also for Jason and Carly themselves, two people who know that once they cross that emotional line, there's no turning back. Jason is facing a deep inner conflict. He had chosen to distance himself from Carly, knowing that being with her would mean she would always live in danger, under the shadow of his past and enemies he couldn't avoid. But now, as Carly is no longer the fragile woman she once was, having gone through loss, hurt, and even the loss of control over everything she once built, Jason is beginning to realize that she is the only one who truly understands him. Not as a hero, not as a man in need of protection, but as a person who has sacrificed his entire life to protect others, leaving nothing for himself. This deep connection is not only the foundation of their relationship but also the spark for an emotional rebirth, fraught with risk. Carly, after all her losses, from Sunny to Drew, from her position of control at the hotel to the trust she once had in close friends, now faces a void that only Jason can fill. She had buried her feelings for him out of duty, morality, and the invisible boundaries set by circumstances and a third party. But when those boundaries start to crumble, when Sunny has completely moved on to a new life, when Drew is gradually leaving her emotional orbit, and when Jason quietly but firmly returns, Carly begins to allow herself to think about what she had forbidden herself to consider. Is loving Jason the right thing to do this time? This wavering is what makes everything more explosive than ever. From their tense but intimate conversations, from Carly stepping back to look at Jason with eyes no longer those of a friend, to the way Jason instinctively stands between Carly and danger, everything is proving that their connection has never disappeared. It has merely been dormant. And now, in an unstable Port Charles, where old relationships are falling apart, where power is being divided, and where trust is being tested, Jason and Carly may be the only thing strong enough to restore order, but they are also dangerous enough to burn everything down. One of the new pressures emerging is the expectation from those around them, that Jason should return to Carly, that Carly needs Jason to stand strong, and that if they don't belong to each other, all the sacrifices they've made will have been meaningless. These expectations are inadvertently putting pressure on both of them, making every action, every small gesture scrutinized through the lens of a relationship that once existed and may now be waiting to be rekindled. They are no longer allowed to simply be friends, no longer able to act like strangers who just happened to meet again after a catastrophe. They are Jason and Carly, a brand of emotion inseparable from the history of Port Charles, and now they stand at a crossroads that's far from easy to choose. The biggest and most profound adjustment is that they are no longer the same people they once were. Jason is no longer the man who only knew how to fight in the shadows, and Carly is no longer the woman who only knew how to control the backstage. They have matured, they have lost, and they have come to understand that sometimes, what makes us strongest is daring to acknowledge our true feelings. And if they choose to step toward each other again, it will not be a repeat of the past, but a completely new chapter, one where two people no longer love each other by instinct, but by awareness, by choice, and by the determination to never let anyone or anything tear them apart again. If Jason and Carly's story continues, it will no longer be about the past but about the ability to resurrect something that once seemed impossible. And if that happens, Port Charles will witness the rise of a truly powerful couple, not just because of social power, but because of the emotional depth they carry with them. A change is coming. And Jason, the man who once lived in silence, may be the one to open the biggest emotional chapter of his life, this time with the only person who has seen him both in the light and in the dark, Carly. The unexpected return of Sam and Britt to Port Charles is slowly creating a seismic, but intensely fierce, wave of emotions, disrupting every feeling, relationship, and fragile order in Jason's world. It's not a coincidence that the simultaneous presence of these two women, once deeply connected to Jason, comes at a time when he is standing at the crossroads of his emotions, trying to rebuild his life after an absence while surrounded by new relationships that have yet to be defined. Sam and Britt's return is not just personally significant, it's a signal that a dramatic and dangerous adjustment is silently erupting, where every secret, every suppressed emotion, and every choice once rejected will now have to come to light. Sam was once the symbol of everything Jason was willing to sacrifice: love, family life, the dream of normalcy, to keep her safe. But at the same time, she was the one Jason had to distance himself from, not because he stopped loving her, but because he understood that their love would always be threatened by the dangerous life he couldn't escape. Sam's return now brings with it an entirely different version of her. A woman who has overcome pain and loss and now returns with a clearer view of what she once lost, including Jason. What makes this situation more dangerous is that Sam is no longer the fragile woman in need of protection. She's a woman with purpose, boundaries, and ready to fight for what she believes is hers. And one of those things, undeniably, is Jason. Britt, on the other hand, is completely different. She doesn't have the long history with Jason that Sam does. But she is one of the few women who has ever made Jason open up after his heart had become too hardened by past wounds. Their relationship wasn't loud or dramatic like Jason's with Carly or Sam. But it was deep, filled with empathy between two people who had lived in the dark. Britt understands Jason in ways others don't, through silent glances, small but meaningful actions, and, most importantly, through the rare honesty in a world full of lies. Britt's return isn't necessarily about rekindling old feelings. But the emotions that were never fully extinguished between her and Jason are now beginning to rekindle, especially as Jason is slowly being drawn toward Carly, while Sasha and Anna still haven't fully defined their relationships with him. The situation becomes even more complicated because Sam and Britt aren't two isolated individuals returning to Port Charles. They bring with them a complex web of relationships, grudges, debts, and unresolved choices. Their appearance forces the other characters to reflect on themselves. Carly, the one who is getting closer to a deep emotional connection with Jason after years of attachment and struggle, will feel threatened when the two women who once held Jason's heart return one after the other. Sasha, who has just found safety and a listening ear in Jason, will be submerged in confusion and hurt. Anna, the only one strong enough to confront the darkness in Jason without needing to change him, will have to choose whether to move forward or keep her distance. Every woman around Jason will feel the pressure as Sam and Britt return, knowing that these names are not just part of the past but pieces that were never fully resolved. For Jason, the most dangerous thing is the new obsession creeping into every action and decision. He can no longer be the one standing on the sidelines, no longer the quiet observer. Sam's return demands he face what he once left behind, a love that never fully extinguished, a family he never truly left. Britt's return brings with it the question of second chances, of whether Jason can love without sacrificing everything as he did before. And in the middle of these two choices, Jason is put in a position no one would envy. If he chooses Sam, he must discard all the connections he has now. If he opens his heart to Britt, he must accept that the past will be unearthed and face wounds that haven't healed. Meanwhile, Port Charles is no longer a peaceful place. The Nurses' Ball 2025 is coming, yet again, not just a stage for performances but a time when all secrets, conflicts, and emotional schemes will reach their peak. With Sam, Britt, Carly, Sasha, Anna, Elizabeth, and Maxie all present around Jason. This event could become the time when every hidden relationship is brought into the open. A diverted gaze, a wrong duet. A moment of silence under the stage lights, anything could ignite a chain of emotional events that explode like never before in Port Charles. The new pressure Jason is facing is not just about who to choose but about accepting that he can no longer hold everything in his hands. He can't protect everything and keep everything. One choice will bring loss. A nod will mean a rejection. And this is no longer the time when Jason can vanish to avoid facing things. He is in the middle now, and this time. All the lights are on him, not to watch him act, but to watch him love, to watch him hurt, to watch him finally live truthfully with emotions that have been suppressed for too long. Sam and Britt have returned. Port Charles is changing. And Jason, whether ready or not, cannot escape the emotional storm swirling around him. A catastrophe not just for his heart but for the entire web of relationships waiting for the first crack to pull everything down. And when it happens, no one will be able to hold their original position. No one. Jason's story is truly entering a period of unprecedented profound change, where everything that has defined him, from his reason, his silence, to his absolute loyalty, is being tested and pushed to its limits. After a long time of being a silent warrior, bearing the consequences for those he loves, Jason can no longer hide behind his familiar black coat or his lifestyle of only acting without showing emotions. Life, relationships, and especially the constant return of characters from the past are forcing Jason to look at himself, no longer a man who lives for others, but a man who must learn to live with his own emotions. This is clearly demonstrating one of the new oppressions that are taking place. Jason is no longer in control of his own story. He couldn't control Sam's return with all his unfinished feelings. Couldn't stop Britt from reappearing and reviving the regret of a love that hadn't blossomed. Couldn't stop Carly from getting closer to his heart in an increasingly natural way. All the women who had touched a part of his heart now returned, no longer as a memory, but as emotional opponents standing right in front of him, demanding answers, demanding choices. Demanding that he admit that even Jason, who had been undefeated in every battle, could not be indifferent to his own heart. This oppression did not come from the outside, but from within Jason himself. It was a struggle between the image of a strong protector, always choosing to step back so that others could be safe, and the deep desire to live for himself. To be loved without sacrificing everything. And that conflict is leading to one of his most dangerous new obsessions, the fear that if he chooses what he wants, he will hurt someone else. But if he abandons his feelings again, will he still be human? That question suffocates Jason every day, every hour, as he stands in the midst of a volatile Port Charles. Surrounded by expectant glances, unfinished words, and unnamed loves. One of the most obvious signs of Jason's change is that he is no longer completely silent. The smallest reactions, the glance. The silent turn away when Sam enters the room, the unconscious squeeze when Britt touches his shoulder. The awkward nod when Carly smiles at him longer than usual, suggests that Jason is being pushed into an emotional zone he can no longer escape. Where before he could have kept his distance. Now everything is closing in on him, forcing him to make a choice, either confront it, or lose everything that matters most to him all over again. Port Charles is no longer a place for Jason to hide. It is becoming an emotional arena, where old and new relationships are resurfacing, where every move he makes has consequences. Nurses Ball 2025 is just one of the surface events of this change, where everyone sees Jason no longer as a silent ghost in the background, but as a man torn between past and future. Between who he was and who he is becoming. And when characters like Sasha, Anna, Sam, Britt, Carly appear around him, all with their own histories, their own traumas, and unresolved feelings, Jason's story cannot help but change. And that is leading to an unprecedented emotional wave, a silent but devastating storm. Jason is coming to terms with the fact that he is no longer in control. The people who were in his past are now in his present. And his future, which he always thought was uncertain, is being written by the emotions he once tried to bury. The question is no longer who Jason will choose, but, will he dare to choose himself? And as the story continues to unfold, as Jason's psychological and emotional adjustment deepens, Port Charles will never be the same again. Because when Jason changes, everyone around him is forced to change, too. And when Jason can no longer run from his emotions, anything is possible.